You are standing at a fundraising gala in the evening warmth, a crystal water glass in your hand, when the room quietly turns toward the man who used to be your greatest business rival. He has lost everything. The contracts, the status, the easy confidence at the edge of a room. People speak to him with soft voices, but their eyes are not soft. There is pity in the mouth and gloating underneath it. And now you are near enough to greet him. This is the test. The event is simple, a rival has fallen, and you have a chance to offer respect. But the mind adds a second thing. It says his failure proves something about you. It says this is your moment to stand taller because he stands lower. It says the room is watching, and your gesture must protect your image. That is the old habit asking for assent. Feel the cold condensation on the glass. Let it bring you back. His result is not your ruler. Their whispers are not your ruler. Your past rivalry is not your ruler. Your next act is yours. Pause. Name the impression. Refuse the cheap pleasure of superiority. Walk over as a governed person. Walking over as a governed person does not begin with the sentence you will say. It begins with the boundary you draw before you speak. There is the event. There is the room. There is your rival, no longer protected by the money, position, or confidence that once made him difficult to stand beside. There are donors near the bar, board members near the auction table, old associates pretending not to stare. There is the warm evening air slipping through the open doors, and there is the crystal water glass in your hand, cold enough to pull your attention back from the noise. All of that belongs to the event. None of that is yet your judgment. This is where most people lose command. Not because they are cruel by nature. Not because they intend to act without honor. They lose command because they let the first arrangement of facts become a command. The fallen rival appears. The room notices. A history rises in the chest. Old competition speaks quickly. The mind says, now everyone will remember who stood and who fell. It says, be careful. If you show respect, people may think you are weak. If you show too much warmth, they may think you are fake. If you show too little, they may see the old rivalry still governing you. None of that is knowledge. It is impression mixed with fear of reputation. The boundary must be made plain. His loss is not yours to govern. The rumors attached to it are not yours to govern. The private satisfaction other people feel is not yours to govern. The old stories told about your rivalry are not yours to govern. The way he receives your greeting is not yours to govern. He may accept it with grace. He may stiffen. He may suspect you. He may believe you are performing for the room. That is outside your command. Do not pretend otherwise. The mind loves to claim power where it has none, because false power gives the feeling of importance. It wants to manage the temperature of the room. It wants to control every glance. It wants to turn one sincere act into a public strategy. It wants the greeting to produce the correct impression in every witness. But Epictetus would cut through that vanity. You do not govern the audience. You govern assent. You govern intention. You govern the next movement of the hand, the steadiness of the voice, the refusal to use another man's collapse as a mirror for your own status. That is the work. The result is not the ruler. Failure is an external. Success is an external. Applause is an external. Being envied is an external. Being pitied is an external. A reputation built in the minds of other people is still in the minds of other people. It can be influenced by conduct, but it cannot be possessed. And if it cannot be possessed, it cannot be allowed to sit on the throne inside you. Look at the glass again. The condensation gathers without asking your opinion. The coldness touches your fingers. That small sensation is more useful than the whole room's silent theater, because it reminds you where attention can return. Here. This hand. This breath. This next step. This one greeting. Your rival's fall does not require you to gloat. It does not require you to rescue him. It does not require you to pretend there was never conflict. It requires nothing from you until you add a judgment. Then the question becomes serious: what judgment will you allow to lead? If the judgment is, his failure raises me, your conduct will shrink, even if your smile looks polished. If the judgment is, the room must approve of my response, your conduct will become theater, even if your words sound kind. If the judgment is, I must avoid discomfort, you may turn away, check your phone, or drift toward someone easier to speak with. These are small habits. They reveal old assent. They show what has been ruling you. The boundary corrects them. What is yours? To see the event without decoration. To notice the first pleasure of superiority and refuse it. To notice the fear of looking weak and refuse that too. To choose respect because respect is the proper conduct of a person who will not be governed by results. To speak plainly. To keep the greeting brief if that is fitting. To offer dignity without demanding gratitude for it. What is not yours? His past decisions. His collapse. The gossip already moving through the gala. The hidden motives of the guests. The future version of this story. The reputation of being gracious. Even that must be released. You are not walking over to purchase an image. You are walking over to practice command. And command begins when you stop asking the external world to guarantee the meaning of your action. You do the right thing because the right thing belongs to your faculty of choice. You do it because your conduct is the only part of the evening that can truly be yours. You do the right thing because your conduct is the only part of the evening that can truly be yours. But before conduct becomes visible, something smaller happens inside you. Epictetus would have you study that smaller thing, because that is where the ruling faculty is either kept clean or quietly surrendered. The room presents an impression. Your rival stands near the edge of the gala, no longer surrounded by the people who once laughed too loudly at his jokes. His suit is still formal, but the authority around him is thinned. The old confidence is not there in the same way. The warm breeze moves through the open doors. Your fingers tighten slightly around the crystal water glass. The cold condensation gathers against your skin. That is the first appearance. The impression says, "He has fallen." That impression is not yet corruption. It is not yet virtue. It is not yet cruelty. It is only the mind receiving an appearance. A man who once competed against you now stands in public after losing what others used to admire. The room is aware of it. You are aware of it. The body reacts before you have formed a complete sentence. Then judgment enters. Judgment says, "This fall means something about me." That is the dangerous addition. Not because it is loud, but because it feels immediate. The mind moves fast. It says his loss confirms your strength. It says this is justice. It says the people in the room will now compare you and him, and you must take advantage of the comparison. It says you can appear generous while still enjoying the reversal. It says pity, if performed well, can become a sharper kind of victory. Now the event has been dressed in false meaning. A rival has lost everything. That is the event. The room is watching. That is part of the condition. But his failure raises me as not an event. It is a judgment. If I offer respect, I may lose status as not an event. It is a judgment. If I do not enjoy this moment, I am wasting an advantage as not an event. It is a judgment. These are not facts standing in the room. They are claims the mind is trying to accept. And assent is the moment you say yes to one of them. Assent may not feel like a formal decision. It may look like a small pause held too long. It may look like a thin smile. It may look like turning your shoulders slightly away so you do not have to greet him. It may look like lowering your voice and saying something polished to the person beside you, something that sounds sympathetic but carries the old taste of triumph. It may look like approaching him with a kindness that secretly wants witnesses. That is why the habit must be exposed. The old rivalry trains certain movements in you. Compare quickly. Guard your place. Read the room. Count who is rising and who is falling. Smile when winning. Act neutral when pleased. These habits do not announce themselves as vice. They arrive as common sense. They say, this is how the world works. They say, everyone is thinking it. They say, do not be naive. But Epictetus does not ask whether the room thinks it. He asks whether it is yours to assent to. Look again at the crystal water glass. It does not settle the whole moral problem. It does something simpler. It interrupts the speed. The cold on your hand gives attention a place to return. Before the next word, before the next step, before the old expression forms on your face, you can notice, an impression has arrived, and it is asking to rule. Name it. This is the impression that his failure gives me power. Name the judgment. This is the judgment that another person's collapse can raise my worth. Name the trap. This is the temptation to let mass gloating choose my conduct. Once named, it weakens. Not because the room changes. Not because your rival becomes easier to face. Not because the past rivalry disappears. It weakens because the ruling faculty has stopped sleeping inside the habit. You are no longer being carried. You are examining. Then action can be chosen cleanly. You do not need a grand speech. You do not need to repair his life. You do not need to prove to every donor that you are noble. The action may be simple. You set the glass down or hold it steady. You walk over without the slow drama of superiority. You meet his eyes without searching them for defeat. You say his name. You offer respect in a tone that does not ask the room to reward you. The chain has been corrected. Impression, he has fallen, and the room sees it. Judgment, his failure has authority over my worth, my image, or my response. Assent trap, I let that judgment decide my pause, my smile, my distance, or my words. Stoic action, I refuse that assent and choose the next governable act. This is the discipline. Not to erase impressions. Not to pretend no history exists. Not to become cold toward human failure. The discipline is to stop the mind before it crowns an external as ruler. Your rival's result can appear before you. The room's opinion can press upon you. The old habit can rise. But it does not get your consent for free. That is where ascesis begins. Not in a monastery. Not in a book. Not after the gala is over, when the story can be arranged to make you look steady. It begins while the room is still watching, while the warm evening air is moving through the open doors, while your former rival is standing 10 steps away, and while the crystal water glass is still cold in your hand. Ascesis is training under the exact condition that exposes you. The first action is to stop feeding the first story. Do not add one more sentence to it. Do not rehearse what he did to you years ago. Do not calculate how many people in the room now know he has fallen. Do not let the mind turn his failure into evidence for your superiority. The event has already happened. Your judgment is still in question. The second action is to lower attention into the hand. Feel the condensation on the glass. Not because the glass is important by itself, but because attention must be governed through something present. The mind runs outward. It searches the faces near the auction table. It measures the donors. It wonders who is pleased, who is pretending, who expects you to act. Bring it back. Cold glass. Fingers. Breath. Floor under your shoes. This is not escape. This is command returning to its post. The third action is to name the impression without obeying it. Say inwardly, with no drama, this is the impression that his failure has meaning for my status. That sentence is a blade. It separates appearance from assent. Before you name it, the impression hides inside the room as if it were reality itself. After you name it, you can inspect it. A rival has lost everything. That is one thing. The belief that his loss can make you larger is another. The fourth action is to expose the habit. Notice the small movement before the public act. The chin lifting. The smile sharpening. The delay before walking over. The wish that someone important will see your generosity. The wish that someone else will see his weakness. These are not random movements. They are trained assents. They show where the mind has practiced for years, comparing, ranking, defending reputation, calling victory moral clarity. Do not condemn the habit. Examine it. The fifth action is to shrink the task. You are not being asked to settle the past. You are not being asked to become friends. You are not being asked to approve his choices, repair his losses, or manage the moral education of the room. The task is smaller and stricter. Walk over without using his fall. Speak without poison. Offer respect without asking payment and reputation. Leave room for his dignity without making a ceremony of your own. The sixth action is to choose the next movement before choosing the perfect speech. Set the glass down if holding it has become a shield. Or keep it in your hand if it keeps your attention honest. Turn your shoulders toward him. Take the steps at an ordinary pace. Do not move like a man approaching a stage. Do not move like a man avoiding a threat. Move like someone whose conduct is not being rented out to the room. The seventh action is to let the words be plain. Say his name. Acknowledge him directly. Good to see you. I'm glad you came. I respect the way you're here tonight. The exact sentence matters less than the source from which it comes. If it comes from pity that enjoys being above him, it is corrupt even if it sounds polished. If it comes from fear of looking small, it is still governed by the audience. If it comes from chosen respect, it is clean. The eighth action is to release the result immediately. He may receive it badly. He may think you are acting. He may answer with coldness. Someone nearby may misread the exchange. Someone may praise you later, and that praise can become another trap. The same discipline applies. His response is not yours. Their interpretation is not yours. The only thing that returns to your hand is your own assent. This is why the gala is not a decorative setting. It is the training ground. A public room makes private judgment visible. A fallen rival tests whether your respect depends on advantage. A crystal water glass tests whether attention can be brought back before old rivalry speaks through your mouth. Every small action trains the ruling faculty. Pause. Name. Separate. Shrink. Choose. Speak. Release. Repeat. That sequence is not softness. It is ordered conduct. Because the untrained person does not merely gloat. He lets gloating right his posture, timing, tone, and silence while calling it realism. The trained person sees the same event and refuses to become its servant. He does not deny the fall. He denies the fall authority over his character. And when you stand before your rival, the true exercise is not whether you can look gracious. It is whether your assent remains your own. It is whether your assent remains your own. From that point, responsibility becomes clear. Responsibility is not the power to make the room understand you. It is not the power to make your rival trust your intention. It is not the power to erase what happened between you. It is the obligation to govern the part that has been placed in your keeping, the judgment you accept, the intention you carry, the conduct you choose. That is enough work for one evening. You stand at the gala with the crystal water glass in your hand, and the old business history is still present. Do not pretend it is not there. There were contracts won and lost. There were meetings where each of you measured the other. There were rooms where your name and his name were placed on opposite sides of a decision. The past is part of the condition. But the past is not a command. The duty now is not to rewrite the rivalry. The duty is to refuse dishonor in the present. If your rival has lost everything, that fact does not give you permission to become smaller. It does not authorize mockery. It does not authorize a careful performance of pity. It does not authorize silence that protects your comfort while pretending to be neutrality. When a human being stands in public after a collapse, and you have the power to greet him with plain respect, the question is not whether he deserves the exact sentence you will say. The question is whether your own ruling faculty deserves to be handed over to old competition. A person trained by Epictetus does not ask, "How can I come out of this looking best?" He asks, "What belongs to me here?" Your tone belongs to you. Your posture belongs to you. Your refusal to enjoy the crowd's hidden gloating belongs to you. Your willingness to meet the man without using his failure as a prop belongs to you. Your restraint belongs to you. Your fairness belongs to you. His response does not. This is where conduct becomes sharper than opinion. Anyone can approve of respect when respect costs nothing. Anyone can say dignity matters when the person in front of them has never threatened their pride. But ordered conduct is tested when the external condition invites disorder. A rival falls. The room watches. The old habit wants a private victory. The social habit wants a polished performance. The cowardly habit wants distance. Duty asks for something cleaner. Walk over without ceremony. Do not make your respect theatrical. Do not lean in with exaggerated sympathy. Do not lower your voice as if he has become a fragile object. Do not punish him with politeness so cold that it cuts while appearing correct. Speak to him as a man, not as a headline. Let your words be few enough to be honest and steady enough to be useful. This is not softness. It is discipline under witnesses. The guests may still whisper. The people who once feared him may enjoy seeing him diminished. Someone may watch you closely, trying to decide whether your respect is sincere or strategic. Let them watch. Their watching is not the master of your action. Public judgment is only another external pressing for assent. It can stand in the room. It cannot govern the hand unless you give it authority. Feel the glass again. The cold condensation is a small correction. It tells you that attention has slipped outward. Bring it back. The room is large, but your duty is narrow. This conversation. This greeting. This sentence. This refusal to let failure become a measure of human worth. Responsibility also means you do not use Stoicism to excuse indifference. You are not above the scene. You are in it. You are not floating over the gala as a man too wise to care. You are accountable for the manner in which you enter the moment. Respect is not an emotion you wait to feel. It is a standard you can obey. So obey it. If he answers briefly, accept the brevity. If he looks embarrassed, do not press him for gratitude. If he meets you with suspicion, do not defend yourself in front of the room. If the conversation ends quickly, let it end. Your duty was never to secure a satisfying outcome. Your duty was to choose conduct that did not betray your own faculty of choice. This is the difference between responsibility and control. Control says, make this encounter produce the right result. Responsibility says, do not become false while the result remains uncertain. Control reaches outward and grows anxious. Responsibility returns inward and grows precise. That precision is freedom beginning to show itself. You can greet the rival without needing him to admire you. You can offer respect without needing the room to reward you. You can acknowledge the fall without being ruled by failure. You can remember the rivalry without letting rivalry speak for you. Then the encounter becomes simple. Not easy. Simple. A man has fallen. A room is watching. A glass is cold in your hand. A judgment asks to rule. And your duty is to answer through conduct, not through appearance. Freedom begins where that answer is no longer for sale. Not for sale to the room. Not for sale to the old rivalry. Not for sale to the pleasure of seeing another man reduced. Not for sale to the fear that respect will be mistaken for weakness. This is the freedom Epictetus points toward, not the freedom to arrange every outcome, but the freedom to keep your faculty of choice from being purchased by externals. The gala may remain full of whispers. Your rival may remain ruined. The past may remain complicated. None of that disappears because you acted well. Stoicism does not promise that. It asks for something stricter. Can you stand inside an unfinished situation without handing command to it? The crystal water glass is still in your hand. The condensation has warmed slightly under your fingers. That small change marks the passage of the moment. You approached. You spoke. You offered respect without theatrical pity. You did not need his gratitude. You did not need the room's approval. You did not need his failure to become proof of your worth. That is a clean result. Not because the external turned favorable, but because your assent stayed governed. A rival's collapse can reveal the people around him. It can also reveal you. It can show whether your dignity depends on comparison, whether your conduct depends on advantage, whether your respect survives when the person before you can no longer benefit your reputation. Let the room keep its opinions. Let the past keep its record. Let the result fall where it falls. Return to what is yours to govern.